The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
Friends, Happy New Year and welcome back to the Unexplained Rundown, the first episode for 2026. It's great to be with you. Apologies up front if I sound like a bit of a foghorn. I'm recovering from the man flu / COVID / whatever else is my little one picked up at kindergarten. So if I start fading as we go through, it's only my voice going. But I've got my trusty alcohol remnants to keep me going. So. But hopefully, you'll have me for the whole time we're together. It's good to be with you as always. Always good to see some familiar faces in the chat. So as always, good to see you, Zane. I believe we go by. I'm not too sure how to pronounce that handle you've got there, but always good to see you, my friend. Jimmy is in the house. Always good to see you, bud. Thanks for joining. Bex is here as well. Thanks for so take some time out of your Friday evening. Like me, I suspect none of you else have anything better to do than talk about and ponder the wonders of all things UAP, UFOs. So it's always good to be with you guys. Short little quick one. Thanks for jumping in a couple minutes early being here. Mark, good to see you as well. Hopefully you'll find this to be an interesting one. I found some of the comments that were made that prompted me to do a little bit of digging on this topic that we're covering up on tonight. Pretty interesting. Strafe is here as well. Thanks for joining. Might be your first time seeing you in the chat, so welcome. Spam Mouse is here as well. On time. You haven't missed anything just yet. So thanks for being here, all of you. And we've got Aussie 9353. Thanks for joining. Good to see you. And Trax has arrived as well. So thank you all for taking some time out of your evening, your morning, your graveyard shift, wherever you are around this mortal coil of ours. If you found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. So again, thanks for tuning in and making this your podcast of choice. If you like to listen to your podcast, check us out on Spotify. Give us a rate and review. Like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. A lot of folks that watch the show aren't subscribed, so smash that subscribe button if you want to keep up to date with what we cover on the Unexplained Rundown and hit that notification bell as well. If you want to go above and beyond the like, share, subscribe, which is certainly appreciated, you can support the channel and see it grow by looking at becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon member for a couple of gold coins a month. So as always, great to have the regular Patreons with us. Jimmy, Jasmine, we've got Shane, Clint, Telekinetic, there's Dan, a few others as well. I can't keep up with now the new ones that have joined. So and we've got some new folks on YouTube as well. So thanks for your ongoing support of the channel, guys. I truly appreciate it. So what are we talking about tonight? And as always, I like to show your comments as we go through. But tonight we're talking about Ross Coulthart's recent comments on a podcast where he revealed, provided an exclusive, that he had received reports from a source regarding UFOs off RAAF Base Tindal. And a bit hard to see, but if you look at the map of Australia there that's above Ross's head, you can see a bit of a makeshift map, but Pine Gap, smack bang in the middle of Central Australia, near Alice Springs. And then at the tip of Australia to the north, you have Royal Australian Air Force Base Tindal, and north of that still is Darwin. So we're going to dive on in, have a look at, or have a listen to and look at some of the comments that Ross recently made on a podcast with someone that I was not expecting to show such an interest in this topic. And that is, for many of my fellow Aussies, you might recognize this face. This gentleman is on the left there is Mark Bouris, or Mark Bouris, is that? Yeah, Mark Bouris. So he is an Australian businessman, has done incredibly well in the financial services sector. I think founder of Wizard Home Loans and chairman of Yellow Brick Road. So entrepreneur, done very, very well in the, like I said, the financial services space. And he's obviously media personalities. He's frequently on the news and so on. So someone that I, one, first and foremost, didn't know even had a podcast, and two, didn't realize that he had an interest in this topic. So he invited Ross to sit down with him, remotely and do an interview. And it was quite an interesting one. I feel, Mark's pretty green to the topic, so there wasn't really any significant new revelations, I should say, in there for us that follow the topic. But Ross did make a couple of comments that I thought were very interesting. So let me play for you a couple of clips that things that Ross said during the interview that I found interesting. And the first one is one that we're all familiar with. So many folks that stigmatize and ridicule this topic, and even some folks that take it seriously but think it's purely prosaic, think, it's all an American problem. Look at all the great tech that we've got in the US. It's probably just our toys. It's only an issue that impacts the United States or North America. And Ross really hits home in this comment that that's not necessarily true. UAP, and more recently, all these drones, some of them, absolutely drones. Others, excuse me, maybe slightly more anomalous characteristics. So let me play this clip for you from that interview, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Of anomalous objects seen over sensitive military bases and sensitive civil aviation facilities right across Western Europe and the UK. And the default explanation is, it must be the Russians. But nobody's got a jot of evidence to prove it. And I'd be very happy if it did turn out to be the Russians, because, frankly, we'd then know what we're up against, because it would mean that the Russians have developed advanced technology which has no visible means of propulsion, which is capable of stealth, because sometimes these objects have quite literally disappeared from not only radar, but from video and the naked eye. Whatever they are, they're capable of quite extraordinary maneuvers. And there are some people who are suggesting that they are, in fact, anomalous. Now, in the case of the Northern Territory, it's thousands of kilometres from anywhere, RAAF Tindal. If it was the Chinese, they'd be very conspicuous in a camper van or a car. It's why we located Pine Gap where we did, because we knew that if there was a Chinese or Russian spy in a camper van deploying with a camera from the McDonnell Ranges to try and see what's going on at Pine Gap, we'd soon catch them. Now, the interesting thing is, it's not talked about inside our military, not because we know what's going on, but because I think it's the worst kind of type A mentality we just don't like admitting. We have no bloody idea what this is. And I'm talking to people inside our military and our intelligence community who admit that there are regularly infractions, breaches of the airspace over sensitive military facilities. Recently, there was one over Richmond in Sydney. There was an object, let's call it an object, I won't call it a drone, that sat there and hovered for over an hour and a half. It was recorded, it was reported to the relevant authorities, but they couldn't do anything to bring it down. These events are happening all the time, all over the world, and not just in the Western world, not just countries of the Western Alliance. It's been happening in Russia, and it's been happening in China as well. I suspect something non-human is making a show.
So there you go. So interesting there that, obviously he mentions, reports, sources obviously reported to him activity in Richmond, activity all over the globe, certainly not in the United States. I'm not privy to obviously any of the information that Ross is, courtesy of his sources. So you can only kind of listen to what Ross says and kind of take it from there. But interesting comments nonetheless that kind of set up this next clip, because Ross mentioned very briefly there RAAF Base Tindal. And so in this second clip, he provides Mark Bouris with a bit of an exclusive about reports that he's receiving from people on the ground at RAAF Base Tindal about reports of UAP. So let's have a look at this next clip.
Just go slightly to the side. This is always seems to be happening in the USA. Obviously, aliens don't just, or whatever these people are called, just don't go to America. They must come across Australia. They probably go across, Asia and other places. Have we had anything along those lines that allegedly have been circling or landing or being retrieved in Australia?
Yeah,
in Australia, right here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most incredible documents in the Australian National Archives is a report that was written by a guy called Harry Turner, who was a scientist with the Joint Intelligence Organisation, which was one of our original spy agencies in Australia. And it was essentially a military intelligence organisation in the 60s and 70s. Harry had been a physicist who had worked at the Woomera test range where the British were testing their ICBMs, and also at Maralinga where the British were testing their nuclear weapons, their atomic bombs, and eventually their thermonuclear weapons. And he witnessed, while he was there, multiple UFO incidents, and these formed the basis of reports that are still visible in our national archives. Australia was a real hotbed of UFO sightings during the Maralinga Woomera tests. There were regular sightings of anomalous craft, solid, structured craft, witnessed by military personnel over Maralinga. There's a wonderful one where they had an outdoor cinema, and everybody at the outdoor cinema looked up and saw a craft, a structured metallic craft, hovering overhead with windows, silently cruising overhead with no visible means of propulsion. These are reports that sit in our national archives. The interesting thing is, when I started reporting on them, a lot of the media started tittering, thinking, oh, this is all rubbish. And what's interesting is they hadn't done their research. It turns out Australia has long been a hotbed of UFOs, and Harry Turner back in the 70s was so concerned about it as a senior scientist in the Defence Department, he actually pushed for Australia to set up its own UFO flying squad investigative team. He wanted a plane on standby so that we could scramble and go and investigate UFO incidents, because he'd seen and spoken to people all about these UFO sightings, and he was convinced, absolutely convinced, that they were real. A lot of UFO sightings, a lot of these anomalous craft seem to appear in connection with nuclear weapons. And that's why I mischievously mentioned RAAF Tindal earlier, because I'll give you a scoop, Mark. I'm currently in touch with people from that Air Force base in Northern Australia who tell me that there's been a spate of sightings of anomalous craft over RAAF Tindal, which is one of our major forward bases deployed for the Air Force in Northern Australia. And these people are telling me that they're seeing UFOs, they're seeing anomalous objects. Nobody's been able to explain to them what they are. The Americans have got a team that's investigating it, and I've spoken to some of the members of that team. Everybody's in a complete flummox about it, but I suspect it's because the Americans have actually got nuclear weapons on Australian soil. Because what's been happening is the Chinese have now developed intermediate range missiles which allow them to hit Guam. And so a lot of the nuclear weapons that were based on Guam as the forward posture for America against a future war with China, we've now allowed ourselves to become Fortress Australia for America. And we've now got, I suspect, nuclear weapons on northern soil in Australia. Nobody's talking about this. And this is one of the reasons why I think the news media in Australia has largely fallen asleep and is getting itself himself ridiculously obsessed with travel expenses scandals that, frankly, I don't think most people give a shit about.
So there you go. Some interesting comments there from Ross. I mean, first and foremost, he kind of talks about, Harry Turner, who we've talked about a lot on this show. Bill Chalker interviewed Harry Turner many, many times before he passed away. And those of you that watch the channel know that my family history has an interesting connection, kind of 6 degrees of separation with Harry Turner. So Harry Turner was stationed at Woomera for a while, as was my uncle, my mother's brother. He worked on a top secret project. He was the program manager for RAASAT, the Weapons Research Establishment satellite, the first satellite that Australia launched into orbit. And we also have my good pal Reese, his uncle, Tom Dalton Morgan, was also kind of the project manager of all things at Woomera. So very interesting that the three of us kind of have this connection with 6 degrees of separation with Woomera. But aside from that, and what Harry Turner did, his research and his recommendations that a rapid intervention team be introduced to get on top of any reports of crashes or crafts that came down. Ross obviously provided that scoop to Mark Bouris about RAAF Tindal. And I found it very interesting, first and foremost, that it's someone at the base that's actually providing Ross with this information. So that, first and foremost, tells me that perhaps this information is not being reported within the Royal Australian Air Force or up the chain of command. We know that there is stigma and ridicule within the Australian Defence Force, and certainly we've seen the level of ignorance and stigma within the government. We only have to recall back to Penny Wong's statements in November 2022, where she kind of interrupted Senator Peter Whish-Wilson's line of questioning with, "Is this a UFO question?" Like it's beyond their time to even entertain questions on UAP when the US is taking it so seriously. So that was interesting to me that someone at the base had actually reached out to Ross to provide information on abundance of reports of anomalous activity, UFOs above the base. And Ross went into a bit more detail and talked about, well, is it because there is potentially a nuclear armament at RAAF Base Tindal? And so I wanted to kind of dig a bit deeper on that. Obviously, I don't have any sources. I'm not privy to the information that Ross is, but it took me on a bit of a journey to find out what I could about, well, what is the probability or the likelihood of there being nuclear weapons or nuclear assets based at the Royal Australian Air Force Base in Tindal. So that leads us into our first article, which I want to show you, which is, well, the media picked up on this. So you have the Daily Mail. I'll just pull up their article. They put out an article a couple of days after Ross made those comments on Mark Bouris's website, his podcast. And 60 Minutes Australia star Ross Coulthart makes stunning claim about what's hidden in the outback. Nobody's talking about this. And so I won't read the whole thing. I'll just read a couple of comments. 21st of January. Again, sorry, folks, for the coughing. An investigative journalist has claimed Australia is a hotbed of UFOs after bizarre unidentified objects were spotted hovering over military bases. Former 60 Minutes Australia star Ross Coulthart told businessman and podcast host Mark Bouris that UFO sightings date back decades in Australia. And that is true. We've talked about this before, that not a lot of people know that Australia has almost as long as a history as the United States in investigating the UAP, UFO, or unusual aerial sighting issue, dating back to the years after Roswell in the early 50s. Ross provides a quote saying, I'm currently in touch with, well, this is probably from the podcast, I'm currently in touch with people from the RAAF Base Tindal in Northern Australia who tell me that there's been a spate of sightings of anomalous craft. He said, these people are telling me that they're seeing UFOs. They're seeing anomalous objects. Nobody's been able to explain to them what they are. Everybody is in a complete flummox about it, but I suspect it's because the Americans have actually got nuclear weapons on Australian soil. So again, direct quote from the podcast. Coulthart said sources inside Australia's military intelligence community admit there are regular breaches of the airspace over sensitive military facilities. Now, that's certainly not something that we've heard from, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, former Air Marshal Robert Chipman, now the Vice Chief of the Defence Force, and his predecessor, Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Chipman. Robert Chipman was prior to the current Stephen Chappell, but prior to Robert Chipman was Mel Hupfield. So they've never said anything along those lines. So some interesting comments that Ross's sources are providing him with. Quote says, recently there was one over Richmond and Sydney. There was an object, I won't call it a drone, that sat there and hovered for over an hour and a half, he said. It was recorded. It was reported to the relevant authorities. Interesting. So I wonder if that's FOIable. If we could get more information, that would be a good FOIA follow-up. But they couldn't do anything to bring it down. And then the article goes on and says, we've allowed ourselves to become, again, this is just kind of reiterating and reinforcing what Ross stated in the podcast. We've allowed ourselves to become Fortress Australia for America, and we've got, I suspect, nuclear weapons on northern soil in Australia. Nobody's talking about this. A lot of these UFO sightings seem to cluster around nuclear and strategic assets, and that's not a coincidence. And we've certainly heard reports of that over the years. Coulthart said there was a history of UFO sightings in Australia that goes back decades, citing witness and former head of Defence Department's Joint Intelligence Organisation nuclear branch, Harry Turner. Mr. Turner saw intelligently controlled craft hovering over secretive British nuclear weapon test in South Australia's desert over Mount Arlinga in the 1950s and 1960s, according to the National Archives of Australia. As a senior scientist in the Defence Department, Turner actually pushed for Australia to set up its own UFO flying squad investigative team, Coulthart said. He wanted a plane on standby so that we could scramble and go investigate UFO incidents. And basically just reiterating Ross's comments. And then it provides some new information. The Department of Defense does not have, well, not really new, does not have a protocol for reporting or recording of UAP, of unidentified flying objects. We know that to be true. The comments come 1 week after a group of miners shared disturbing photos of a UFO in the remote region of Western Australia during an early morning drive. And this was actually covered in, I believe, an earlier article last year, where this is the photo that they had captured. Now, I have absolutely no idea what it is they captured. It comes weeks after a group of workers had reported seeing an unidentified object in the sky near Fortescue Metals Group Solomon Mine site in Western Australia's Pilbara region. So interesting. That was an interesting, obviously, photo that was taken. Again, whatever it is, I have no idea, but good to see at least the media picking up on Ross's comments there and reporting on it and doing an article on it. So again, just kind of reiterating what Ross said in his podcast interview with Mark Bouris. Let's now have a look at a little bit more info about RAAF Base Tindal. So if you're wondering, again, if you're not an Australian and you're wondering where on earth is RAAF Base Tindal, where if we pull up good old trusty Google Earth and we just type in RAAF Base Tindal, well, this just give you a sense as to where it is in Australia. So you can see it's right at the top, the tip of Australia. We'll just do a bit of a 3D there. So you can see, we come on out, that's the tip of Australia just there. And it's basically, right in there. And you can see there is an airport, it's Catherine Airport, and you've got all of the, there's a, living quarters or residential area. And there's basically all this is Royal Australian Air Force Base Tindal. So what's interesting about RAAF Base Tindal, again, I didn't know a whole lot about RAAF Base Tindal, is that if we pull up information that the Royal Australian Air Force has put out on RAAF Base Tindal, this is what they have to say. So RAAF Base Tindal is located 15 k's outside of Katherine and 320 k's southeast of Darwin. So it's not quite on the tip of Australia in Northern Territory. Although it is Air Force's youngest operational base, except for Bear bases, it is now one of Australia's most important defence sites. Without going into the history, every year, RAAF Base Tindal hosts major exercises, typically featuring visiting aircraft and personnel from around the country and world. Notable exercises include Pitch Black, Diamond Storm, Arnhem Thunder, and Talisman Sabre. And some of you that are Aussies may have heard about those exercises in the news over the last few years. RAAF Base Tindal's ideal dry season weather and proximity to Delamere Air Weapons Range makes it a superb location to conduct high-end training sorties for the RAAF and coalition partners. So if you're wondering, well, what is this Pitch Black thing? Well, let's have a look what is available online, and I'll just pull up the US Air Force's website because they were involved in Pitch Black. It's a bit hard to see there, but I'll come on down. So this happens every 2 years. It's a major training exercise. US Airmen conclude Australia's largest ever air exercise, and this was published on the 5th of August of 2024. It says, Royal Australian Air Force Base Darwin, US Air Force, that's where that was reported from. US Air Force airmen participating in exercise Pitch Black 2024 in Australia concluded operations on August 2nd, excuse me, marking the end of the largest iteration of the Royal Australian Air Force's biennial capstone exercise. Pitch Black, held July 12 to August 2nd, primarily at RAAF Base Tindal and Darwin in Northern Australia, focused on the tactical execution of advanced air combat capabilities with multinational partners. It aimed to enhance interoperability between the air forces of 19 nations. So it's massive. The US, Australia, Singapore, Italy, Indonesia, India, Japan, UK, France, Germany, Republic of Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Spain, Brunei, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and Canada. Massive, massive exercise. And I won't... I'll just summarize, with more than 140 aircraft and 4,000 members from multiple continents and geographic regions, Pitch Black 24 provided participants an ideal opportunity to share their expertise and learn from each other. Building long-standing working partnerships among nations is one of Pitch Black's greatest achievements, with those alliances allowing greater integration across the spectrum of operations. The US has a long-standing relationship with Australia dating back 80 years. We've heard the word 80 years before, haven't we? The establishment of the Far East Air Forces, which has only improved since we began participating in Pitch Black in 1983, said General Kevin Schneider, Pacific Air Forces commander. With the scope of Pitch Black, we're hoping to bring many more countries into these type of events to continue building a worldwide network of specialists to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. Rather than read the rest of the article, why don't I actually show you a clip from the Royal Australian Air Force, what they put out, summarizing Pitch Black 2024. So let me play this for you, because I think this kind of gives you a sense as to you can really take away the complexity of the exercise and the scale of it. So let me play this for you. There we go.
We're coming to the end of Pitch Black 24, and Pitch Black 24 has not only been our largest Pitch Black, it's been our best Pitch Black. And that's been a function of the 20 nations who have come here. And over the last 3 weeks, they've flown about 1,700 missions at about a 93% success rate, which is pretty amazing. And the things that we have learnt, the capabilities that we've developed, each of us go away much stronger. We couldn't have done it without the support of the Darwin community, and they have been amazing. So we've been able to pay some of that back through the Mindil Beach Fly Past, the Darwin Open Day. We had 22,000 people at Mindil Beach, 30,000 people at the Open Day. But the support that we've got has been phenomenal, and we can't thank them enough. The only thing to do is to look forward to Pitch Black 2026. And we say that it won't be bigger, but it probably will be. And we look forward to getting back to the top end for what is an iconic and amazing exercise. Thank you.
There you go. Pretty impressive. And, you know, if you've ever been to an air show before, I mean, I've attended, I went to Avalon, the Australian International Air Show, what was it, in last year and in 2023 and last year. And, you know, that's only a small scale compared to these massive exercises. And you know, getting to see in 2023, I got to see the F-22 Raptor up close and far out. What a machine. And I can only imagine how exhilarating it would be for, you know, the folks in Darwin and around Catherine to, you know, see these amazing man-made machines do incredible things in Australian airspace as part of this pitch black exercise. And you know, I've got a couple of folks that stay in touch on social media, direct messages and so on. And a good dude, Pat Riley, reached out to me. He's up north, and he said, "G'day, Grant. Just a heads up for you. Exercise Pitch Black 2026 is due to start near the end of July and into August. Uses the RAAF base as its main base. He was there in 2024, and there was you know, aircraft from dozens of countries, but Tindal hosted the F-22 Raptors then in 2024 to keep them away from prying eyes. So I imagine, you know, not too many people would see, including the Indians who were taking part, but but use Russian aircraft and tech. This year, so 2026, is going to be the biggest ever in Tindal. Rather than just being an overflow base, will also host a lot of US and Aussie assets. I don't know what assets are coming, but I intend to go and stalk out the base to take photos. So my point is, and this is speculative, if NHI, if non-human intelligence kind of ties it back into Ross's comments, if NHI is surveilling US tech or nuclear armament, nuclear assets, nuclear bases, pitch black will be the perfect time to watch us. Or if indeed the US have ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, it's also a good time to test them here in the outback. One whole week of exercises is at night, so not many people would really see anything. Now, I realize the opposite might apply, and a lot of eyes will on the exercise. I'll bet 99% of people go to Darwin to observe. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see if there are any reports of unusual activity around that time. So July, August of this year will be pitch black 2026, obviously bigger and badder than it was in 2024. So that kind of gives you a sense as to what goes on at, you know, why RAAF Base Tindal plays a big part in our defense and the defense of our allies. You know, this big opportunity for biennial testing via this, you know, training tactics and combat exercises via this pitch black. So, but what is interesting, and I'll come to you, actually, you know, let's use that as a chance to jump into some of your comments, because I don't want them to all bunch up like I got stuck with last time, and I didn't always have some of the context. Yes, Bex. No, not so much summer cold. It's called having children. My little boy got, we suspect COVID, excuse me, and then passed it on to my wife, and then I think I either caught that and or the man flu. So I got the best of both worlds on that there. So anyway, as Jimmy says, though, the whiskey certainly helps as well as the H2O. But some of the comments came on through. Zane, but I will second Bex. Water and flush it out, maybe rug up a bit, sweat it out. Well, I'm certainly sweating out. If you can't see, I'm sweating up a storm here. And we had a 44, 45 degree day here only a few days ago in Melbourne. So it's been pretty brutal with the with the weather as of late. So Beck says not nuclear weapons, nuclear sites, kind of going off of what Ross's comments there were, and that's going to lead us into where we're traveling next. Nukes on Australian soil, Stephen West 7919. That's interesting. So let's talk about that. Beck makes a good comment. We have so much uranium in Australia. Why wouldn't we have secret nukes here? It's interesting perspective. Shorter Cook, we have critical structures in Australia, certainly true, as well as nuclear. We are building very large data centers for the Eurasia and the Pacific. Thing is, they are building them in the capital cities. And there's a big data center actually not too far from where I live, probably about only a few Ks away. What is it? Next DC, next data center. You know, they're starting to pop up everywhere, and they're pretty impressive setup they got going. Let's have a look. Mark Looper, the Americans are pumping millions into both RAAF Tindal and Darwin. Apparently, they'll be basing bombers here. And what do or can US Air Force bombers carry? Very interesting comment there, Mark Looper, and that's exactly where we are going to go next and talk about. So put a pin in that, folks. Let's have a look. Some of the other... good to see there's some comments going back and forth and conversations internally. Let's have a look. So I'll see if there's anything else I've missed here. MacLoop, you were there in 2024. Absolutely massive exercise. The noise around Darwin was amazing. This year will be bigger. It certainly be. I'll be following it in the press and see what video footage comes of it. Tindal was named after the first RAAF commander to die in World War II on Australian soil. I think that's actually pretty cool to honour the first ever war. Yeah, I agree. I didn't know that either. That is interesting. The Air Force waited over a year to report the UFO to F-16 crash because they didn't want to ruin Chinese balloon story. I think that's some conversations happening in the chat, which is great to see. And let's see. I think we're pretty much up to date. So Mark Looper's comments are interesting because that takes us to where we're going now. So let's dive in a little bit more to RAAF Base Tindal because let's see, make sure I've got the right article here. Where is it? Make sure I've got the right one. This is the one. Yes. So the ABC, this is going back a couple of years now. This is the 31st of October of 2022 via ABC's Four Corners. Article that came out, US Air Force to deploy nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to Australia as tensions with China grow. And this is kind of, what Ross was, I think, alluding to. Maybe he was, kind of hinting at the fact that these B-52 bombers can be nuclear armed. The United States is preparing to deploy up to 6 nuclear-capable B-52 bombers to Northern Australia, a provocative move, experts say, is aimed squarely at China. An investigation by Four Corners can reveal Washington is planning to build dedicated facilities for the giant aircraft at Tindal Airbase, south of Darwin. The US has drawn up detailed plans for what it calls a squadron operations facility for use during the Northern Territory dry season, an adjoining maintenance center and a parking area for 6 B-52s. That's massive. Becca Wasser from the Center for New American Security says putting B-52s in Northern Australia is a warning to China as fears grow. Beijing is preparing for an assault on Taiwan. Having bombers that could range and potentially attack mainland China could be very important in sending a signal to China that any of its actions over Taiwan could also expand further, she says. The bombers are part of a much larger upgrade of defense assets across Northern Australia, including a major expansion of the Pine Gap Intelligence Base, which would play a vital role in any conflict with Beijing. The B-52s have been the backbone of the US Air Force for more than 60 years with a capability to deliver long-range strikes of both nuclear and conventional weapons. The US documents say the facilities will be used for deployed B-52 squadrons. The ability to deploy US Air Force bombers to Australia sends a strong message to adversaries about our ability to protect lethal air power, the US Air Force told Four Corners. Asked when the B-52s would begin their deployment at Tindal, Australia's Department of Defence declined to comment. No big surprise there. I won't read any more because there is another article that I want to read. So let's move away from that one because there was another good article that was put out by the War Zone, very reputable outlet that report often on US defense capabilities. They've even reported on the UAP topic quite a bit. Tyler Rogaway has done a lot of reporting for the War Zone on the UAP aspect, but this was their reporting. When was this? This was this was October 31st. So basically the same day this report comes out, kind of reiterating the same sort of stuff. But Australian airspace gets upgrades for American bomber deployments. Won't read the whole thing. an airbase in North Australia is being upgraded to better accommodate deployments of up to 6 US Air Force B-52 strategic bombers in a potentially provocative move that's been widely seen as a deterrent toward China. While deployments of US bombers to Australia are in themselves not new, the latest developments include dedicated facilities that will make regular stationing of these aircraft much more efficient, and comes at a time of significant tensions between the US and China, especially over the future of Taiwan. The upgrade work at RAAF Base Tindal, a remote installation south of Darwin in the Northern Territory, is being funded by the US government, and its extent was today confirmed by Australian officials, ABC reported. The changes to the base will include an expanded apron with space for 6 B-52s, squadron operation facilities, maintenance infrastructure. Once completed, the airbase will be much better able to host bomber detachments as well as tankers and fighters, with work also addressing fuel and munition storage and mission planning buildings. Currently, Tindal is the permanent home to a single RAAF F-35A stealth fighter squadron. So they're our F-35s that we purchased from the US. The cost of the squadron operations and maintenance facilities at Tindal has been put at $14.4 million, with the total value of modernization at the base reaching $100 million. So a significant investment. Let's see. I won't read through any more because that pretty much reiterates what what ABC covered off on. But that was in 2022. So obviously a bit has happened since that time. So the Sydney Morning Herald, less than a year later, reported the following. This is on 15th of February 2023. Interesting, around the time that, I think the days after, this is actually the day of the Senate estimates where Peter Wish-Wilson pressed Air Marshal Robert Chipman. And it was actually the days after the Chinese spy balloon and those shoot-down events of those 3 unidentified aerial objects. So Sydney Morning Herald reports U.S. nuclear-armed bombers visits allowed under treaty obligations. American B-52 bombers armed with nuclear warheads could rotate through Australia without breaching treaty obligations, the nation's most senior defence public servant has indicated. The Australian public would never be informed whether such aircraft are carrying nuclear weapons under the so-called US policy of warhead ambiguity, in which it neither confirms nor denies if particular forms of military equipment are nuclear armed. Now, we hear often that term neither confirm nor deny in FOIA a lot. A lot of the stuff that John Greenwald does, and even 1 or 2 FOIA requests that I've submitted to come back and said that they can neither confirm nor deny, what they call a GLOMAR response, where they don't confirm or deny. They basically just leave you hanging and they don't tell you anything. While adamantly refusing to address hypothetical scenarios, Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who we know, said the responsible way of handling this is to recognize that the US has a neither confirm nor deny position, which we understand and respect. It was revealed last year that the United States is preparing to build dedicated facilities for up to 6 of its B-52s. Nuclear weapons opponents and the Chinese government blasted the plan on the basis could escalate tensions in the Asia-Pacific and accelerate an arms race in the region. Successive Australian governments have understood and respected the long-standing US policy of neither confirming nor denying the presence of nuclear weapons on particular platforms, Department of Defense Secretary Greg Moriarty told Senate estimates hearing on Wednesday. Australia will continue to fully comply with our international obligations, and the United States understands and fully respects Australia's international obligations with respect to nuclear weapons. Australia is prohibited from, this is the key word, from permanently housing nuclear weapons in the country under its treaty obligations. But Moriarty, speaking in general terms, suggested US nuclear-armed bombers could temporarily pass through Australia without breaching international law. The stationing of nuclear weapons in Australia is prohibited by the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, to which Australia is fully committed. There was no impediment under this treaty on the or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to the visit of foreign aircraft to Australian airfields or transit of Australia's airspace, including in the context of our training and exercise programs and Australia's force posture cooperation program with the United States. The B-52 is a long range. We won't go into that. That's pretty much stuff we've already kind of covered. Green's defense spokesman, David Schubert, said it is highly alarming that Australian military facilities are being made available for the US to launch its nuclear-capable bombers. This decision not only makes us a nuclear target, it further erodes our sovereignty. The US has made it clear it won't tell anyone when their B-52s are nuclear armed or not. This leaves Australia in the dark about our role in the USA's global nuclear strategy. Defence Minister Richard Marles said that while Australia had agreed to an increased tempo of Australian rotation in Northern Australia, there had been no change in policy regarding the presence of nuclear weapons. America maintains a policy of ambiguity in terms of the nature of assets that are on their platforms, and they do that so as to amplify their extended nuclear deterrence, he told the ABC. Asked whether the US nuclear-armed bombers should be allowed in Australia, opposition defence spokesman Andrew Hastie said, of course, we want to see a greater presence of the American military in the Indo-Pacific. And we'll kind of leave it there. So that kind of brings us back to what Ross was saying in his interview with Mark Bouris. If there is a frequent rotation of B-52 bombers that are armed with nuclear weapons, well, then there is nuclear weapons on Australian soil, just not permanently, and it doesn't breach any treaties that we have to not permanently store nuclear weapons on Australian soil. So incredibly ambiguous there, and I suspect the B-52 bombers probably would be armed with nuclear weapons in the event that there was an escalation of tensions or whatever it might be. So if there is indeed this nuclear connection with UAP activity, then it begs the question, well, is it not reasonable to then entertain the notion that, well, if there's UAP activity over RAAF Base Tindal that potentially houses B-52 bombers with nuclear weapons on board, then that's coming directly from someone at the base, that's pretty big. That's pretty explosive. Now, skeptics will say, well, could it be folks that are just misidentifying, aircraft, new aircraft that's next generation stuff that's being tested, trials, drone remote operated vehicles, unmanned aerial systems, all these sorts of things. It absolutely could. However, again, Ross is saying that this source of his is someone that's positioned, that's based at that RAAF base in Tindal. So that, I think, adds a layer of, maybe we should raise our eyebrows and consider that a little bit more seriously. So I went a little bit further and I thought, well, where are these comments coming from? Surely if senators are going to be asking these sorts of questions of people in positions in leadership authority in defense is not just going to rock up to a Senate estimates, Greg Moriarty or Penny Wong, and say things off the cuff. They're going to have a script, like we do know that Robert Chipman did for his appearance at Senate estimates in 2022 and 2023. And it just so happens that if we pull up the Australian Department of Defence's Freedom of Information Disclosure log, well, only a few days ago, last month, I should say, 15th of December, there was this neither confirm nor deny policy, a document that was released through FOIA. Now, there isn't, usually what accompanies this document, I'll see if I can show you an example. Usually it accompanies a statement of reasons document, so you can see what the request is. I suspect they've changed the way they do that, and they only release the documents now. But historically, they would release a statement of reasons, which would show you what the original request was. So let's go back. Let's have a look at, well, what is exactly in these documents that were released on the 15th of December through FOIA, because I think it ties perfectly nicely in with in the context of what Ross is saying. So let's pull up the documents in question. Here we go. So it all stems from in October of 2023. This is a Senate estimates brief document, and it looks pretty similar to what many of you will have seen from the documents I've been able to secure for release through FOIA on Senate estimates brief documents on UAP. So in this, document, the Senate estimates brief that's been released through FOIA, they've highlighted some of the questions that were asked by Senator Jordan Steele John, Greens, West Australia, back on the 31st of May, 2023. So this Senate estimates brief was obviously October 2023, goes back a couple of years, and they're kind of preparing themselves for similar questions that were asked, in May of 2023. In a question on Notice 81, AUKUS Ports, Senator Jordan Steele asked a series of questions regarding, and I'm just going to focus on the ones that pertain to the B-52 bombers rotating at RAAF Base Tindal. The alignment of United States B-52 bombers rotating to Royal Australian Air Force Tindal and the Treaty of Rarotonga, whether the government would prevent nuclear-capable or armed B-52s to visit the Royal Australian Air Force Base Tindal, the transit and stationing of United States nuclear weapons in Australia, and United States declaratory policy on carriage of nuclear weapons, and whether the government would only permit non-nuclear capable United States aircraft in Australia. Some other questions that were submitted, again, by Senator Jordan Steele John. This time it was, question was tabled 14th of July. Question is, will the government reject the transit of nuclear weapons in Australian airspace, territories and waters? The answer, as a demonstration of Australia's commitment to reducing the threat of nuclear war, the follow-up question, will the government commit that any B-52 deployment on Australian soil will only permit non-nuclear capable aircraft? So let's get into the answers. So this document provides basically a script for a Penny Wong or a Greg Moriarty or anyone that is answering questions and representing defense if raised. So if the question is asked around Australia's intent to host US strategic nuclear capability, talking point, visits by nuclear capable assets from the United States to Australia have occurred for decades. Nuclear capable platforms are not necessarily armed with nuclear weapons or deployment. If asked, how does Australia know if the United States platforms in Australia are nuclear armed, like the B-52 bombers, the B-2 bombers? Successive Australian governments have respected the long-standing United States policy of neither confirming nor denying the presence of nuclear weapons on their platforms. So again, all the comments that were given for that Sydney Morning Herald article was all scripted, it was all prepared, it was all ready to go. The United States does not station nuclear weapons in Australia. Stationing of nuclear weapons in Australia is prohibited by the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, known as the Treaty of Rarotonga, to which Australia remains committed. There is no impediment, and this is key, there is no impediment, again reiterating what was in the article, no impediment under the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty or the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons to the visit of dual-capable foreign aircraft to Australia's airfields or transiting Australia's airspace. Question, how does Australia know if the United States assets that rotate through Australia under the Force Posture Agreement are nuclear armed? A nuclear-capable military platform is not necessarily armed with nuclear weapons. There's never a straight answer. Stationary of nuclear weapons in Australia is prohibited by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone Treaty, to which Australia remains committed. Visits by United States strategic assets, yada, 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 are consistent with our obligations under these treaties. Neither of these treaties prohibit dual-capable foreign aircraft being present at Australia's airfields or transiting Australia's airspace. Successive Australian governments understood the respectful long-standing United States policy of neither confirming nor denying the presence of nuclear weapons in this context. And that is basically, and then responding to those questions specifically, B-52s and B-2 bombers are not based at RAAF Base Tindal, but visit Australia, this is the key, visit Australia on a rotational basis. Visits by United States strategic assets are consistent with our obligations under these treaties. Australia will continue to fully comply with the international obligations. The United States understands and respects Australia's international obligations regarding nuclear weapons. And then it kind of goes on. So my take is that, no, we're not going to store nuclear weapons permanently on Australian soil, specifically RAAF Base Tindal, but we're going to allow those B-52s that are nuclear armed to transit through Australia on a rotational basis. So short answer, yes, there are nuclear weapons on Australian soil. They're just not here permanently. So if that's happening at RAAF Base Tindal, and you've got someone reaching out to Ross who's based at that base in Tindal saying there's some pretty funky stuff that we're seeing above RAAF Base Tindal. Well, that's worthy of further scrutiny, I would say, and just makes that scoop from Ross that more interesting, because we have heard from the Australian Department of Defence and the Royal Australian Air Force time and time again, move along, folks, nothing to see here. UAP is not a problem that we have to deal with. We know it's on our space. It's a problem for the United States. Is this a UFO question? That's what we're dealing with. Yet now we have, one would assume by the scope of Ross's vetting and the network of sources that he has, that if he's vetted someone that is positioned at that base and is coming to him with some pretty incredible information, then I would say that's worthy of further follow-up. And I hope to see more reporting from Ross on this, because I think it would be very, very interesting to then get some formal comments from the Australian Department of Defence. You guys are saying you don't have a recording or reporting protocols on UAP, but you're getting someone on the ground that's in the Royal Australian Air Force saying we're seeing some stuff above RAAF Base Tindal that are moving in ways that we can't explain, anomalous activity, and we've got nuclear weapons, transiting in and out of RAAF Base Tindal, I think, and look at the history of UAP and nuclear weapons or nuclear installations, and I think that's worthy of some further digging and a formal response from the Australian Department of Defence. So I just found that interesting. The documentation there, I always like to show tangible data and evidence. And FOIA, it's not everything. It's breadcrumbs, it's bits and pieces, but it is an official record, an official document from the Australian government. We can't speak to the veracity of what they include in that document, but you can clearly see how their talking points informed what was reported by the Sydney Morning Herald, and it just adds that additional layer of context to what Ross has commented on in that interview with Mark Bouris. So interesting. Now, some of the other things that are interesting to note about RAAF Base Tindal is he got some pretty cool stuff being tested there. Let's have a look at, and who are the players? Well, Defence Connect reported, when was this? Last year, 12th of February, 2025. Northrop Grumman, who we've heard as having a possible connection to the UAP issue, completes testing on third RAAF MQ-4C Triton aircraft. Pretty funky looking piece of equipment. American Defence Prime Northrop Grumman Corporation has successfully completed testing of Australia's third MQ-4C Triton remotely piloted aircraft system. Australian government has already announced intentions for 4 MQ-4C Triton aircraft to be based at RAAF Base Tindal in the Northern Territory and operated by the Air Force's reformed No. 9 Squadron located at RAAF Base Edinburgh, South Australia. Northrop's statement released earlier this month confirmed the most recent series of testing at the company's Palmdale facility in California. This company is preparing to ferry the aircraft to Naval Air Station in, where have we heard this one before? Patuxent River, or commonly referred to as Pax River, Maryland. And that's been in the news recently thanks to Christopher Sharp, where it will join Australia's second Trident 4 collaboration testing before delivery of both aircraft to the Royal Australian Air Force, according to the company's statement. Robust flight testing and validation of these uncrewed, high-altitude, long-endurance aircraft are key milestones ahead of delivery to Australia this year. So Australia's got some pretty cool weapon, aircraft coming its way, uncrewed aircraft. Australia's Air Force is collaborating with Northrop Grumman and the US Navy to field the most advanced maritime intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting capability available today. So I won't read anymore. So that's interesting. Well, it doesn't just rest there. There is testing of other pretty funky equipment going on as well. You have a press release from the Australian Department of Defence on the 24th of June of last year. Ghost Bat, a flying success in Tindal. Now, I've seen the Ghost Bat up and close. It was actually on display at the Avalon Australian International Air Show last year in Melbourne, Avalon in Melbourne. And again, pretty slick looking piece of machinery, uncrewed on the right there. I suspect was an F-35. or an F-22, one or the other. I think that's the F-35, not sure. But, you know, pretty mean piece of technology. Exercise Carlbad has wrapped up at RAAF Base Tindal after the successful deployment operation of the MQ-28A Ghost Bat in regional territory. Successful completion of the exercise demonstrated that the Ghost Bat can conduct operations from a location outside of Woomera training area. Geez, these all get connected, don't they? South Australia, which to date has been the exclusive operating location for the Ghost Bat. Exercise Carlsbad Wing Commander Philip Parsons said the success of Exercise Carlsbad had been a whole team effort. Yada yada. We won't go on. But you got the Ghost Bat being successfully tested at Woomera at Tindal. Doesn't stop there. You also have reported 27th of June of last year, ADM MQ-28 flies for first time. You know, this is also I guess that's the Ghost Bat again. So yeah, reported, or is it slightly different? Not sure. MQ-28A was the Ghost Bat, so I don't know if that's a different version, but perhaps it's the same. Oh no, it's not, because it's Boeing and the Royal Australian Air Force have for the first time deployed to and operated the MQ-28 Collaborative Combat Aircraft CCA at an operational Air Force base. Boeing is well advanced, improving MQ-28's operational capability, and this is another significant milestone in demonstrating the utility of the aircraft across various scenarios. Boeing Defence Australia's MQ-28 Global Director Glenn Ferguson said. So long of the short of it, it's a good testing ground for the Northrop Grummans, the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, I imagine, to test the pretty cool toys that Australia is purchasing from these defence contractors. Is it possible that what RAAF people positioned at RAAF Base Tindal are seeing the testing of these crafts and they're not aware of them? I'm not too sure. You would think that someone that's positioned at the RAAF base would be clued in to what's being tested on the base. Again, we don't know anything about Ross's source, so it's pretty hard to tell. But if it is truly anomalous activity, UFOs, as Ross said, then obviously it begs further scrutiny and further investigation. So again, I hope that Ross is going to be bringing us more information on that in the not too distant future. So on that note, folks, we might end it there on RAAF Base Tindal. Again, all circling back to Ross's comments in that interview with Mark Bouris. If you haven't seen the interview, feel free to watch it. Link is in the show notes below, so do check it out. We might use that as an opportunity to have a look at some of the comments that you've made as we've been reviewing some of those articles before we jump on into the rundown and we explore news and events closer to home. So let's pull up, let's see what you've been. Let's go back here. Okay, let me find. So we're going to go back to where, oh, there we go. You might have read this before. The Americans are pumping millions into both RAAF, Tindal, and Darwin. Yep, we did read that one. So let's move forward a little bit past there. And there we go. Here we go. So Mark Looper adds, at RAAF Darwin earlier this month, and looking at the building works, it's doubling infrastructure size with existing perimeter. B-52H Stratofortress specifically carries the AGM-86B cruise missile. Is that the B-52 that will be there? Interesting. The Air Force, oops, that was pertaining to some other comments. Bex chimes in, the AGM-86B is nuclear or can be armed with nuclear weapons. So this is all kind of hinting at the fact that, you know, UAP and nuclear activity kind of all, it's not definitive, but there are a lot of puzzle pieces that kind of that makes sense, if you ask me. They're very generous of you. Tanny 3057, super sticker $20. Thank you for your support, my friend. You didn't need to donate. Certainly, super stickers and super chats are absolutely welcomed. I don't ask for them, but I really appreciate if you're prepared to support the show and you enjoy the content that I put out. So thank you, Townie 3057. I greatly appreciate your support there. Beck comments, the treaty doesn't define nuke ban here as only those nukes stationed here, right? I've got to read that treaty now. Yeah, Bex, I trust your judgment, so I'd be interested to see what your comments are if you get a chance to have a look at that. Mark Looper, they aren't mentioning the B-52s. They've deployed here to RAAF Ambly a few years ago. And I think even in Queensland, I remember seeing some exercises. There's a shot of a B-52. I can't remember. It might have been can't remember if it was Australia or in Florida, but there's certainly been testing in Queensland too. Jojo, it is possible, Grant. Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt, that there is probably going to be nuclear weapons transiting in and out of Australia if the Northern Territory, Pine Gap, and RAAF Base Tindal are going to be of such strategic importance to Australia with respect to keeping our eyes on China and potential escalation and tensions in the Indo-Pacific, and obviously China's plans to take back Taiwan, if that's indeed what it's going to do. So interesting. Blue Crayon 71, great to see you here. Good to be here with you, Grant Goazi. Thank you for joining us as always, my friend. Good to see you in the chat, and Bex is going to have a look at that treaty and report back. So interesting. Doesn't really reveal anything that we can write home about, but just some interesting bits and pieces that all provide, I think, a little bit more context with respect to what Ross is commenting on there. So let's use that as an opportunity to now transition to the rundown, where we basically cover news and information that is happening down under. My show, the Unexplained Rundown, is very Australian centric, so I like to cover off on what is happening close to home, even though we do kind of cover what's happening in the US and abroad. But let's kick things off with, it's another Ross Coulthart special. We're just going to look at a brief clip from one of Ross Coulthart's recent Q&As with the lovely Megan Medic for Reality Check. So it was one of the Q&A episodes where Ross was asked this question, which from a viewer. So let's have a listen.
Stephen Greenstreet on X, has Ross successfully summoned any alien spirits with his psychic powers yet? Please ask.
Okay, so the Stephen Greenstreet, this is not a non-partisan player. Stephen is a New York Post video editor who purports to be a journalist, who has done his level best to snidely and maliciously attack anyone who is a whistleblower. Frankly, my position with him, I've largely ignored him for the last few years, but he's somebody who I think people need to be extremely wary of. And once I've acknowledged his existence here, I won't be acknowledging his existence again. The interesting thing is that he makes a complete straw man point here. He's asserting or implying that I've said that I can summon aliens with my psychical powers, which of course is a flippant, pejorative and completely misleading comment, which is not based on any factual reality at all. I have never asserted that I have psychical powers, and it's a classic illustration of the kind of straw man argumentation that idiots like Stephen Greenstreet are capable of. He's how does one say this? A person who seems to derive a lot of his own meaning from pulling down and attacking people who are very, very courageously making an effort to expose what they know is going on inside an unreported, probably illegally operating covert program inside the National Security Administration. And frankly, his flippancy diminishes and demeans the New York Post. I was more happy to see one of his colleagues, my Australian friend Miranda Devine, asking Trump a good, honest question about UAPs. And did you notice Trump gave a good, solid, honest answer? He didn't treat it with flippancy, and he didn't treat it with the derision and malicious unkindness that Stephen Greenstreet treats every potential whistleblower and witness. He's a person best ignored and forgotten and consigned to the rubbish bin of history.
Could not agree more with what Ross said just there. I think he absolutely nailed it on the head. That's Greenstreet's modus operandi. He is all about ridicule, ostracize folks, just insult them, try and play the game of assign guilt by association or try and discredit someone merely based on their association with another. That is what we see from Stephen Greenstreet time and time again. And that Q&A that Ross did and that Megan Medic threw that question to was quite timely, because only a few days after that comment from Ross, I actually released an extensive article, an opinion article that I've actually been working on for more than, it's certainly more than a year and a half. I was actually going to do a video series. I put one episode out over a year ago called We Need to Talk About Greenstreet Episode 1, The Golden Rule, where he basically disclosed Brandon Fugel as a source without having authorization to disclose any information about Brandon Fugel. So basically doxed Brandon Fugel. And so I had been spending months and months on and off, not all in one go, because I've got a family and obviously I have a daytime job and other things. So I was just spent months and months and months researching, fact-finding, and trying to get a broader picture of why is it that Stephen Greenstreet is so blatant in his bias, his bigotry, insults, his ridicule, how quickly he'll try and just put people down because they maybe have had an experience or they've made a claim or they're part of the group of people that we've heard from so many times, David Grush, Jay Stratton, and so on, and highlighting also Stephen Greenstreet's bad behavior. So, and I was amazed that it had as many views as it did. I mean, it got 81,000 views. If you haven't had a read of it, feel free to check it out. I've added the link in the description below. It took me a long time to do, draft after draft after draft. So I'm not going to read through the whole thing for you. But I basically, it's opinion piece. So I put an argument out there that Stephen Greenstreet, time and time again, is guilty of confirmation bias, exercising comments that are highly insulting and bigotry centric, and has shown time and time again that he engages in bad behavior that just does not reflect on what we expect from an investigative journalist who works for a major media outlet like the New York Post. Now, think of what you will of the New York Post. We should expect better from folks that are employed to report the facts and not their opinion based on their disillusionment with their past faith, the Mormon faith, applying incredibly poor behavior, questionable tactics, again, confirmation bias and bigotry. And I include evidence. I include information that ties directly back to Stephen Greenstreet, how he behaves and how he acts in public and on platforms like X and other social media platforms, and that includes YouTube. So I include the receipts. I include all of the evidence that basically backs up the argument that I'm putting forward in this opinion piece. So if you want to read through it, feel free. Again, it took me an incredibly long time to do draft after draft, and I felt I just became so disgusted with Stephen Greenstreet's behavior and treatment of people that are just coming forward and reporting their claims. And obviously, we can't do anything with claims. They're saying, well, I don't have any evidence to back this up because perhaps it's classified, or I don't have the receipts to show for whatever reason. Well, that doesn't mean that you should automatically then just shit on someone because they've come forward with a claim. You should ask questions in good faith, not accept their claims in blind faith, and treat them with dignity and respect, like any other investigative journalist would do. Do you see Carl Bernstein or Bob Woodward shitting on their sources and insulting them and ridiculing them? I mean, there's some of the foremost award-winning investigative journalists that this world has ever seen. Obviously the work that they did on all the President's Men, the scandal, the Watergate scandal with Nixon, and they had a film made about them with Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford. Incredible film. That's the kind of integrity and conduct that we expect from people that are reporting the facts, investigative journalism. And I don't think Stephen Greenstreet has a shred of integrity about him, based the way on he conducts himself, how he ridicules and insults others, not just others, but even the subjects and the subjects of his reporting and his sources. And I include all of that in the opinion piece. So if you're interested to look it out, check it out. I'm not saying, read this now, you got to read it. I don't get anything from it. I don't have a monetized X account. I just thought it was incumbent on me to, need to highlight some of the conduct and behavior of this guy that presents himself as a investigative journalist. You couldn't be anything from it, far furthest thing from it, in my opinion. So if you're interested, have a look at it, check it out. We'll use that as an opportunity to now keep the ball rolling. What is also been happening close to home is there was an article that came out only just the other day, and Bill Chalker let me know. He didn't let me know personally. I saw a post of his on Facebook where he had seen an article by Crikey, Australian publication, and this is only from a couple of days ago. Basically, in the title, Defense Scutum, well, I can't even pronounce that, on UFO policy, hasty jogs on from leadership query, and Abbott, Bolt, and Reinhardt have their day. So, plus want to become an Tasmanian Green Senator. Now's your chance. Well, what does this all have to do with UFO? Well, let's start off by saying, the way they approach it is probably always, a bit questionable. But the truth is out there. Over the past few years, there's been a flurry of interest in UFOs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. In 2023, a U.S. congressional hearing heard, and they've put links in here, a former spook claim. I wouldn't use the old. You can see the characterization there, trying to kind of get that little jab in there as well. Former spook claim there was a government cover-up of real proof. Just this month, there's been a spike in bets on online prediction markets that Donald Trump will declassify documents revealing their existence this year. Well, what Donald Trump says and does are two completely different things. The Australian government has been less open to the existence of these potential extraterrestrial objects. Documents released on the Freedom of Information System reveal that the Department of Defense leaders were briefed for budget estimates that there is no compelling reason to divert resources to the specific recording and investigation of unidentified anomalous phenomena. The department thinks this whole thing is so ridiculous that it doesn't currently have a policy for reporting UAPs. That hasn't always been the case. The documents also say that the Defense Department used to have an unusual aerial sightings policy. It was reviewed in 2003 and was confirmed as being still held in the National Archives in 2008. But when interest in its location was raised again in 2011, the document couldn't be found. The briefing said, nor was there any evidence that it was destroyed. Without any more information, its whereabouts, the policy was officially cancelled in 2013. So for half a decade, Australia's Department of Defence could neither confirm nor deny the existence of a US UFO sighting policy. Well, they're not entirely accurate there because the document they're referring to is basically just the latest version of the Senate estimates briefing that I was able to secure for release through FOIA only a few months back. Now, I didn't make it known. I didn't put it out on social media because it's actually not even, there's no changes to it. Whenever there is a Senate estimates, any previous Senate estimates briefs that have been prepared, they get reviewed if there's an opportunity for them to be updated so that whoever's fronting up at a Senate estimates and answering questions before senators has an up-to-date script and talking points that they need to follow. Now, because Senator Peter Whish-Wilson hasn't appeared in person at Senate estimates since 2023, and there hasn't really been any other questions on notice submitted, probably in almost over a year now, there is really nothing for them to update in that Senate estimates brief. So, they're pulling some information from the Senate estimates brief that's not entirely accurate. The whole interest in this location is right. This is all pertaining to documents that were housed in the National Archives of Australia but could not be located. It may not have been any direct relation to the Department of Defence's policy on unusual area sightings. It could have just been historical reports, other correspondence, and so on. So really nothing that's all that interesting. But again, Crikey covered it. So, it's always good to see a media outlet covering the topic. But what was sad to see in this article, and I wasn't aware of this, shows you my lack of due diligence and not keeping up to date with what's going on all the time in Australian politics. If we come on down, let me zoom on in so it's a bit easier on the eyes here. Oops. So it's with a bit of a heavy heart that I read. Greener pastures. Any crikey readers in Tasmania fancy a career in federal politics? You've got a few more days to nominate to replace Peter Whish-Wilson in the Senate for the Greens. After Whish-Wilson announced his retirement last year, which I wasn't aware of, so I don't stay in frequent contact with Peter Whish-Wilson all the time, but I wasn't aware of his retirement. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The party opened up a public call for nomination to fill the upcoming vacancy. Koshin thought it a little unusual that a fast track to federal politics will be open to the public rather than, we don't even need to read anything else there. So, yes, unfortunate news. Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, the only Australian senator to take this topic seriously to date and ask questions in an Australian context in Australian Parliament, is retiring. And don't know exactly when, but he spoke briefly about his impending retirement in an brief interview that he gave to the ABC in October of last year. And again, I only dug this up a few days before this show tonight. So this was on the 20th of October of 2025. And let me play you his comment. Goes for about 5.5 minutes. Talks about what he's most proud of in his time of service in the Australian Parliament, in government as elected representative, essentially, and what he plans to do in his retirement. So let me play this for you. For those that are interested, because I think Senator Peter Whish-Wilson has been such an integral part of elevating the conversation of UAP in Australian context. Again, he's largely the one elected representative that has, for us, people that take this topic seriously, ask questions for the Australian public, on behalf of the Australian public, to get answers from the Australian government, the Australian Department of Defence, as to what it's doing or not doing about the issue of UAP. So let me play this for you.
I haven't got a date yet. That'll kind of depend on the pre-selection process for my replacement. And I've also got a select committee which I'm chairing, which finishes up in the first half of next year. So yeah, it'll be sometime early next year or mid next year, I reckon.
Why have you decided to leave Australia's Parliament?
Well, I've had 14 years, or be coming up to 14 years, Leon, which has been an amazing opportunity. And I just think it's the right decision for me personally. I'm 57 and feel like I've still got some good years left in me, but it's someone else's turn to carry the torch. It's it's a big job and it takes a lot out of you. And I'm pretty tired, pretty worn out. And I think politicians do a lot of work. We travel a lot, especially federal politicians going to Canberra. I just think it's time for someone else to do the work that needs to be done.
Senator, the question might be then, who is that somebody else? Have you got somebody you would like to see succeed you?
Look, one thing that's made my decision really easy, Leon, is there's so many good people in the Tasmanian Greens who are willing to put their hand up and run for this position. We've had fantastic candidates at the last federal and state election. The only thing that has kind of kept me awake at night, I suppose, is wondering who's going to continue the work. But I look around me and I'm so grateful that we've got so much depth in our movement. Everyone's replaceable, Leon. Sometimes that's a hard thing to accept as a human being when you put your heart and soul into a job. But when I took over from Bob Brown back in 2012, I know there was there was a lot of people grieving in the party for the loss of such a giant leader, and it was the same when Christine Milne retired in 2016 and Nick McKim took over. But there's always someone out there that is willing to fight and pour their heart and soul into the job, and I'm very confident. I'm very replaceable.
Will it necessarily be someone based in the north of the state? For people that don't know, Green Senator Nick McKim is based in southern Tasmania. You're based out of Launceston. Will it necessarily be a northerner that replaces you?
Look, I can't say that it will necessarily be a factor, Leon. That's really up to the members. So our members will decide who the next senator is. There's no hurry in terms of the process. I think the party's will look at starting the process, soon, but they'll take their time. And look, obviously on a personal level, I'd like to see a senator based in the north, but that's really a decision for the party. Previously, Christine and Bob were both based in the south, and we still function really well as a party. But that's something for the members to decide.
Your biggest achievement, the thing that you'll point to as you depart Parliament as having achieved in 12 years there?
I think it's lasting 14 years, Leon. I think probably my biggest personal achievement. It's really hard to point to one specific thing when you work for your electorate every day, and you've got so many issues that you're pouring your heart and soul into. It's an interesting question you asked, because I was just reflecting on the weekend. My first campaign as a senator in Tasmania, indeed all around the country, was to get container deposit schemes up and running, cash for cans, which of course we've now got in Tassie. And part of the reason for that is these recycling refund schemes or producer responsibility schemes are needed, right across our waste stream, like for batteries and solar panels and e-waste and for plastic. And we've done a lot of work in that area too in the last 15 years, and I'm confident that that's all coming down the line. When I started, Leon, I remember the Gunns pulp mill, which is kind of the reason I came to Parliament. Gunns went into liquidation, and this big project that I spent 10 years of my life campaigning on had come to an end. And Fran Kelly interviewed me on Radio National, and she gave me a question I wasn't expecting. She said, "Well, you've campaigned for so long to get this outcome. What are you going to do now? You've come all the way to federal Parliament to stop this pulp mill, and it's now ended." And I can't remember exactly what I said, Leah, but I think I said, "Well, look, you know what, Fran? I think it's just a dress rehearsal for a much bigger stage. Everywhere we look, we see corporations calling the shots with our governments at state and federal level, and even sometimes at local government level. And I look at the work that I've done, not just in plastic, for example, holding big producers of plastic to account. I've managed to work with communities all around the country to stop a number of big, significant offshore oil and gas drilling projects in a time of climate emergency. I was one of the few who campaigned to get a Royal Commission into banks and financial services, which we did get, and I think we saw nearly 70 pieces of legislation following that. A levy on the big banks, new money laundering laws. There's been so many things that I've worked on that I've been really proud of, but it hasn't just been me, it's been my team, my staff, my colleagues, and communities all around the country. I wouldn't claim necessarily to have achieved anything on my own. It's all been with a bunch of amazing people in our movement.
Leon Compton, keeping the conversation going.
So there you go. So, it just kind of shows you there are so many other issues that are important to Senator Wish Wilson and obviously important to his constituents. And, it just highlights that UAP is just one tiny little issue that he advocated for. And there are so many other things that are important to him. I mean, he was responsible for playing a part in getting the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, transferred back to Australia. So he's had a lot of issues that have been certainly meaningful to him and meaning to his constituents. We're just a very small portion of that constituency, and I'm very, very grateful for all of his efforts all of his advocacy to date, basically on the UAP issue. And I reached out to him in private, only after finding out about his impending retirement, and wanted to obviously pay my respects on social media as well. So, on behalf of many appreciative Aussies, really thank you for your advocacy on the UAP issue over the past 4 years. Since 27th of October of 2021 is when he started taking this topic seriously, or asking questions in Australian context in Australian Parliament. And I and many others are truly grateful for all of his efforts to really elevate the conversation in the Australian government, and obviously wish him the very best in his impending retirement. So sad, obviously, to see Senator Wish Wilson leave the arena. Who will fill his shoes? Will they have an appetite to follow Senator Wish Wilson's lead and continue to ask questions and probe on the UAP issue? Who knows? So it's unfortunate that we're losing an ally, but again, incredibly grateful and appreciative for all of his advocacy to date, and obviously very grateful that I've been able to have the engagement that I had with him over the last few years to help inform his lines of inquiry. So sad news, but hopefully, who is in the hot seat behind him and replaces him? Will they be an advocate for UAP? Who knows? Watch this space, basically. So that brings us to the last thing that I wanted to cover off on, just something that's what's ahead. And I was made aware of this by great dude Steve, who does Beck's good friend. He put together, edited a trailer for an upcoming documentary film that will have its world premiere in Melbourne in March, in just over a month's time, on March 5th at a film festival. And so let me show you, talk a little bit about it. It's called The Man Who Saw Them Arrive, the Colin Cameron story. Now, this is a Melbourne-based case. I was not aware of it. I had no idea who Colin Cameron was or his story. So let me read you a brief synopsis about the documentary. It's got a runtime of 70 minutes, directed by Zev Howley, produced by Zev Howley and Andrea Lee Stavrianos. So synopsis: in January 1968, a mysterious encounter on Kew Boulevard shattered the quiet life of Colin Cameron. Obsessed with uncovering the truth, Colin documented strange phenomena and shared his experiences with those closest to him as the events grew increasingly intense and dangerous. Told through the eyes of his cousin Andrea, who honors a promise to share his story, this documentary weaves Colin's journey with first-hand accounts of Australia's most famous UFO sightings, including Westall 1966, and insights from leading UFO researchers, a haunting exploration of mystery, memory, and unanswered questions hidden in Melbourne's backstreets. So let me play for you the trailer. Steve Zev was kind enough to provide this through to Steve, so I'm very happy to play it for you. And I would encourage you to get along to the film festival if you're based in Melbourne and you want to check it out. I've already bought my ticket. I'll be there. I'm keen to learn about the story. But this is the trailer for The Man Who Saw Them Arrive. So let me play this for you now.
Andrea Stavrianos, and I'm related to Colin by second cousin. I've grown up with him when I was little, and we became pretty close because he didn't have any children. I promised him that I'd tell his story. It did start to affect his mental health down the track because he was trying to live in two different worlds. one that he's trying to explain and one that he couldn't work out.
Pretty extraordinary journey for him. And
this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
Whoop, let me get rid of that. So there you go. So that is getting its world premiere on the 5th of March. And I've added the link to the film festival in the show notes below. Let me pull that up for you. It's at Cinema Nova in Melbourne. And obviously on screen, that's researcher George Simpson, who's done a lot of work on the Frederick Valentich case. And obviously you saw a couple of clips there of veteran researcher Bill Chalker in there as well. So I know very little about this case. I'm as interested as others are to learn about it. And obviously, the impact that it had on Colin's life in his later years. So it sounds like it was certainly sad in some respects as to what happened to him in later years. But you can book tickets if you're interested. Again, it's on Thursday, the 5th, 6:30 p.m. Is the screening time. Again at Cinema Nova, and there'll be a post-screening Q&A with the director Zev Halley and the co-producer Andrea Lee Stavrianos and Experiences. And I'm hoping to have Zev. See if we can schedule some time. Hoping to have Zev on the podcast for an interview next month. Still working out dates, but because February is a pretty busy month for me. But hoping to have him on the channel next month and gain some insights from him as to what really took his interest. What was it that compelled him to do a documentary on this particular case and this particular individual. So, and obviously learn more about the production and the case itself. So if you're interested to check it out, again, link is in the show notes below. Any Melbourners that I know there's one or two that are planning to go, so it's always good to see some familiar faces at these events. And on Westall, only the month after that, 6th of April 1966. 60th anniversary this year of the Westall flying saucer incident. And I know that I don't have all the details, but I know that some of the primary witnesses will be organizing a event at the Grange. That's where George Simpson is standing in that photo. Like they've done in previous years, members of the general public can go along, meet with primary witnesses, ask some questions, take a walk down to the reported landing site at the Grange, which again, I've covered Westall extensively on this channel and in the documentary that I put together, the Westall Witnesses. So feel free to check that out on the channel if you haven't. But if you're keen to go along, again, link in the show notes below. I think it was $25 for the ticket. So if you get along, don't be a stranger. Come say hi. I look forward to saying g'day. And again, obviously, hope to have Zev on the show at some stage next month. So very interesting. Again, don't know a whole lot about the case, but certainly interested to learn more. Any Australian case I basically find interesting, particularly if it's one that I don't know a whole lot about. I mean, before I moved to Melbourne, I knew very little about the Westall case. I knew it very superficially, but it's not until you actually, I think, well, certainly for me, live in the locale where something happened. I didn't really have an appetite to dig deeper, and thanks to being introduced to Shane Ryan, I was very intrigued to learn more about Westall, and then obviously being able to being invited and privileged to attend last year's Australian UFO Festival up in Cardwell, which I'll be attending again this year. It's in August. Had an opportunity to get on site the famed Tully Nest or Tully Saucer Nest site, and hear directly from Shane Panisi, who was only a boy when it happened. His father, Albert Panisi, it all went down. So if ever there is a case that I can learn more about and is close to home for me, or if it's in the area that I'm traveling to, visiting, where I live in, I'd love to actually take a trip up to the site where Kelly Cahill had her encounter. I know that a couple of pals of mine in this community have have taken a trip up to the Kelly Cahill site. So that's another case that's an intriguing one. And I know Bill interviewed Kelly Cahill some years ago and had an opportunity to hear her testimony directly. So there you go, folks. That's everything that I wanted to cover off on with this month's episode of the. One last thing I wanted to share with you. Let me just pull it up for you. One quick announcement. I had the good fortune of being interviewed by Rowan, who is a wonderful person, experiencer. Rowan Bowe, she was a fellow presenter at the Australian UFO Festival in Cardwell last year, and she actually does a weekly or almost weekly, maybe every fortnight radio show on the UFO subject in Australia, and it is called UFO Radio. And I had the privilege of being on with Rowan earlier this month, and I believe the episode is going to be airing tomorrow. So I've put the link in the show notes below. Rowan has interviewed a number of folks. I'll just pull up the most recent interview that they did. Let's see if I can pull it up. Oh, maybe it doesn't let me go into it. Explore. I can't seem to but Roger Stankovic has been interviewed. I know that there have been Cheryl Gottschall, and she's already done four episodes this month, so I'm doing it pretty much almost weekly by the looks of it. So I think the episode that I am in, featured with Rowan, comes out probably tomorrow, I imagine. So I'll post the link on social media if you're interested in listening to it. If you haven't heard me ramble on it before about UAP in an Australian context, feel free to check it out. That's the show, my friends. That is, look at that. We're under 2 hours. I can't believe it. We're actually going to be doing this in record time. So, but of course, we do have a lot of questions and comments that have come through. So let's get to the live chat and see what you guys have to say. Let's just pull up a couple of the, where did we get to? So I think we got to, here we go. Dead fish cheese spread. Loving the handle. Is there an Area 51 type base in Australia? Well, as Mark Luper alludes to, Pine Gap is often called Australia's Area 51, and I actually did a deep dive on Pine Gap a couple of months ago, and so do check it out. It does have some interesting connections in the lore of ufology with Area 51 and S4, and that is that's smack bang in the center of Australia, not far of Alice Springs. Let's have a look at some of the other comments that have come through. Ross Wood using Trump to make Green Street sound worse. I don't quite catch the whole comment there, so feel free to add that again, Trax, if you wish. I totally agree, Bex. Yeah, Brandon was unfairly, doxed. I mean, Brandon was so welcoming. And I unfortunately too trusting of Stephen Greenstreet. Maybe he thought that Greenstreet had good intentions, but as history tells us, he certainly did not. And he burnt that bridge very quickly. And I suspect Brandon Fugel, who I respect the work that Brandon Fugel is doing. I think he truly wants to investigate the phenomenon and find out what's going on. And he's always been I've always been very appreciative of the time that he's given me when I've engaged him directly in DMs and asking him questions. He's always been very forthright and candid in his responses. So there's no question that he's never shied away from. Bex, his being Green Street behavior, a set of pattern is a set pattern of traits that lack a conscience. Yep, it certainly looks that way. The theories of Greenstreet's brother getting a position in the military at a similar time to him flipping on the US subject are interesting. Yeah, that Greenstreet's does have a sibling that is doing relatively well, I believe, in the military, and it's just interesting dichotomy, isn't it? One that is in the very in the Defense Force, and there are so many folks in the Defense Force that Greenstreet will shit on and ridicule because they put out a claim, or for whatever reason he wants to pull them down. I think that's his brand. I think drama is Greenstreet's brand, unfortunately. And we don't want drama. We just want the facts, mate. Tell us the story. Report the facts as you know them to be. And if those facts change over time, report that. Don't present your bias and your grievances that you have with someone that you don't agree with or has had a beef with you. So yeah, once upon a time he hosted the Basement Office show and seemed to be supportive of the topic. Yep, and he did a big 180, and I talk about that in the opinion article. I think his disillusionment with his Mormon faith is one of the reasons why he's now trying to destroy ufology as best he can. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate the comments, my friend. Yeah, it took me an incredibly long time to get it ready for publication. So I appreciate your comments. I haven't read Crikey for years either, and actually I'd completely forgot about it until Bill had posted that he read it. And always good to see you, Aaron. So thank you for joining. Bex goes on to say regarding Greenstreet, if you try to understand his behavior emotionally, you will just end up ruminating and doing your own mind in. His behavior has to be considered an intellectual framework, not an emotional one. Bex, Greenstreet has a personality disorder. And thank you for the heads up on shkram. Dead fish cheese spread. I had not ever come across that word in my travels, so thank you for the heads up. Jane, temperamental teenagers. Sorry, you have to depart. No worries. Thanks for tuning in, brother. Always good to see you. Feel free to watch tomorrow if it's of interest. We've got RAAF joining us from X. They seem to have the ability to distort the dimensional barrier, hence the shape-shifting. Might have been pertaining to an earlier comment, so if you want to add some context there, RAAF, feel free. I'm not aware of all of the sidebar conversations that are happening as we go through, but feel free to opine and add to it if you wish. Let's have a look. Oh, there we go, Bex. We are all going to the premiere in March. Okay, good on you, Bex. Give it your support. So I'll certainly be there. So if you're gonna be there, I look forward to saying g'day. You actually used to live right next to Q Boulevard. Interesting. I wonder if you had you ever heard of that case, Bex, as a close to Q Boulevard resident. I'd be interested to know. Thank you, RAAF. Thanks for chiming in. Tracks. Despite editing this, I have no idea. Oh, so I suspect this is I don't know what the guy is, who that guy is at the end, but very curious to know that was. Is that? I don't know if that's you, Steve. It could be. I suspect it is. Again, I can't identify readily via the handle, so apologies if I'm misidentifying. But again, I thought it was a great job by Steve putting that together and editing the trailer. Yep, I thought it was well done. Certainly made me interested in the case, and that's why I bought my ticket. I think Zev said some of the Westall experiences will be at the screening, which is who is referring to in the Q&A. That's great to hear, and always good to see some of the Westall regulars. Blue Crayon, need to move to Melbourne. Brizzy is pretty quiet here. Did go to a local library UFO chat with an academic last year. I remember hearing about that. Can't remember the name of the guy, but I think I touched on that. I might have covered off on that very briefly on one of the previous episodes. Can't remember. Kelly Cahill is an alias. Bill Chalker no doubt knows her real name. I imagine she didn't want to. I don't know a whole lot about the Kelly Cahill. I know the Kelly Cahill case was, or at least the name Kelly Cahill was mentioned in an X-Files episode, which is, again, the lore of the subject. I only know the very superficial elements of Kelly Cahill's story, so would keen to learn more, and that might be a future deep dive for me at some point. Counters Down Under. Anthony, always good to see you, my friend. Try to get in. What have I missed? We've covered a bit. We've talked, or just feel free to go back and watch, my friend. Yep, doing the graveyard shift. I feel for you, my friend. So get some sleep and feel free to watch at your leisure. Yes, it is, Steve. So good job. Editing that trailer. I think you did a great job. And yeah, feel free to send it through to Anthony if he wants to cover off on it. Look. Jasmine, always good to see you. Thanks for tuning in, my friend. I know Friday nights are a bit of a hard ask, certainly late in the evening. So thanks for tuning in. It is Steve. Apologies, Steve. I didn't recognize the tracks handle. My memory is a little bit scattered today, so apologies there. Mark Looper, his surname was Dodd. That's right, Dodd at the library event. Andrew Dodd, that's the one. Yes. And UFO intros. Thank you, my friend. Yeah, I try to keep the studio visually appealing. It's a little bit crowded at the background there. I've got a few little things that the kids have bought me over the years. So appreciate the kudos, my friend. It's I didn't want to just have a blank wall. So the latest edition, I mentioned this in my last episode, got the McMinnville black and white photo. That's the latest addition to the wall. So that's the case that got me started, got me interested in this topic way back when I was a wee little fella in the 80s, attending a UFO photo exhibition. And that photo was blown up on a big frame or canvas around in the photo exhibition, and that is the photo that did it for me. Hard to see there, but those that know the McMinnville case know that photo well. So that is it, folks. We are just under 2 hours. As always, truly appreciate you spending your evening with me. To my fellow Aussies, thank you as always for staying up late and tuning in for another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. If you're across the pond abroad, thank you for tuning in. If it's your morning, if it's your graveyard shift like Anthony, I truly appreciate you making this your live stream and podcast of choice. Again, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Give this episode a like and share it if you're interested. It always goes a long way. So by next month, hopefully my monotone voice is going to leave me, and I'll be back to the golden tonsils that you're all used to. So sorry, folks, for sounding like a foghorn as we go through night. But as always, truly appreciate your company this evening. Thank you, Jimmy, for joining. Aaron, always good to be with you. Bex, always appreciate your engagement and comments in the live chat. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and look forward to seeing you again on another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.